Welcome back to another episode of Tales from the Insol Crypt, where we have invited a few of the most notable, talented, and up-and-coming insolvency and restructuring lawyers to share their stories and insights. Our guest this week is widely acknowledged as one of Canada's foremost insolvency practitioners and is the founder of Thornton Grout Finnigan, the highly sought-after Robert Thornton. Robert, welcome to the podcast.
It's my pleasure. I think it sounds like a lot of fun.
Bob, you know, the first question I'd like to start with is, how do you get into this world? I mean, you know, I think a lot of people would say, you know, you must be masochistic to some degree to want to go into something like this. But, you know, obviously for those that are in it know how much fun it can be at times. But how did you get into the game? Yeah,
you're quite right. With one exception, there's one person I know that actually always wanted to be an insolvency lawyer, and that's my partner, DJ Miller. But other than that, most of us fall into it. In my case, it found me. I didn't find it. I went to law school to become a criminal lawyer. And so when I was in law school, I did all the clinic work I could get my hands on. And by third year, I realized that all my clients were crooks and they didn't have any money. So I realized that this was not a good career path for me. So I pivoted and decided to become a commercial litigator. And so I went to Faskin's, that had the biggest litigation department of the big firms in Toronto. And when I got there, I realized that, commercial litigation wasn't a lot of standing on your feet and doing things. It was a lot of research and organizing files. So the actual corporate side of my articling rotation was more attractive to me because I love the deal making. And then, as it happens, the insolvency group of Faskin's reached out to actually offer me a job, and then I got the best of both worlds. You get the real-time litigation. You get to solve complex business problems in a contracted time frame, and nothing's boring. So it found me, and I'm glad it did.
So, I mean, you've had probably a storied career at this point, many more to come. But what's the most, if you thought about the file that sticks out to you most, thus far, what would it be?
It's a hard choice there. I love Justice Farley's quote where he says that, every filing has within it the seeds of its own chaos. And they are all beautifully chaotic and they each have their own memories. But I think the toughest case that I ever found myself in was the restructuring of Coopers and Lybrand. So Coopers did some more than 20 years of what the judge actually called scorched earth litigation, trying to defend itself in an auditor's negligence case. It ended up with a multi-billion-dollar judgment against it, and leave denied to the Supreme Court of Canada. So all of the ex-Coopers partners, by that time, Coopers had merged in with, had not merged, but had succeeded into PricewaterhouseCoopers. But all of the people that were once Coopers partners, there are over 200 of them, were all facing personal bankruptcy because they were all personally liable. It was a true partnership back in the day, and these folks were all at the end of their professional careers. Many of them were retired. So you can imagine what a catastrophic event that would be, all coming out of a case that you personally had nothing to do with. So that was a very, very tough set of facts. It was also legally challenged because, as you may know, you're not supposed to be able to restructure partnerships under the CCAA, but we found a way to do that. And the personalities were at this extreme end of the scale. On the one hand, I was up against the plaintiff's counsel, who was led by Avram Fishman, who's one of the hardest nosed negotiators the world has ever seen. Fortunately, he was at that time also a very close friend, so we had a bond of trust around which we could start negotiating a deal. But also behind me, acting on behalf of all of these partners all across the country, were groups of lawyers who were more than eager to give me advice and direction about what I should and shouldn't be doing. And it included folks like Andy Kent, who is also one of the more challenging personalities to deal with in our profession. So I was caught in quite a sandwich in that one, and but we managed to get it done. There was a lot of creativity. We invented what we called a synthetic bankruptcy, where each partner, with the help of an insolvency trustee, actually filled out a statement of affairs as if they were going to go bankrupt. And staring at that, they were asked to make a contribution into a pot, which a pot eventually got large enough after a few trips to satisfy the claimants. But it was just a massive undertaking to try to organize that many people and to achieve a consensus around the group. And we even had to drive over one of the plaintiffs on the creditor side because they didn't like the deal, and they thought they had a veto holding position. So we had to orchestrate some strategy around that, and eventually they stared into their grave long enough that they decided to get on side with the plan. So it was a lot of fun.
That is massive, Bob, because we know that people in the insolvency field have some opinions, and I just can't imagine what it took to coordinate that many professionals to come to a consensus.
It was
How long did that take? A year? 2 years?
Or a couple of years, I think.
Yeah.
It was quite a time. But the interesting thing is,
I was going to ask how expensive it was. That's my typical question.
It was cheap at twice the price, my friends. We kept everybody out of bankruptcy. But they came to me after 20 years. They'd been litigating for 20 years, and they had never won even one motion at any point in the trial or the pre-trial experience. And my first piece of advice to them was, guys, stop sticking your hand in the blender. we've got to get out of Quebec. You're not going to get any love there. We need to go into a CCAA proceeding in Toronto, and then we can hopefully change the channel. And you have to start thinking of these folks as your stakeholders, not as your enemies. And we managed to, through a lot of effort and communications, managed to get everybody to change the channel and start thinking about resolution, not litigation.
So Bob, you had mentioned a couple names during that story of people on the other side of the aisle from you. I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you for a name of your biggest adversary in your career. And that could be in a respectful way, of course. But are there any names that come to mind? Well,
there is, yeah. So as I said, the toughest negotiation I've ever had was with Avram Fishman, and he's just a very, very tough, smart, wily negotiator. But I also seem to butt heads on a regular basis throughout my career with Andy Kent, and he's also a very strong-willed person. And there was a time where he was on for a syndicate of banks. I was on for one of the banks, and my bank wanted out. It wanted to assign its loan off to somebody, and Andy had drafted the loan documents, and he was of the view that wasn't possible in the current circumstances. But I looked at it, and I thought it was. I thought there was a hole, and
you must have loved that.
Well, we got in quite a tussle about that, but it finally ended up in front of Justice Holden back in the day, and he sided with me. And Andy would not recognize my physical existence for about 3 years after that. And then finally one day we found ourselves in yet another meeting, and people were debating the strength of their case and the interpretation of an agreement. And Andy said, in front of me, and as it happens, the same client that was with me for the first file the years earlier, he said, "Look, guys," he says, "you may think this is what it means, but I'm here to tell you that when you go in front of a court, you just never know. The court may come up with some whack-a-mamey idea of what you thought you were thinking at the time, and even though that's not what you were thinking and not what you drafted." And
that was subtle, very subtle, right?
Subtle, yeah. And so my client after the meeting took me out and he said, I think you got a backhanded compliment in there somehow. But so Andy and I have been level ever since. So he's a good guy.
Bob, before we let you go, there's going to be some people, watching this that are entering into the field, whether it be as a trustee, whether it be from the legal side, whether it be from the private equity side. What are some of the things that they should know entering this world, a world that you know very well?
I often do this little experiment when people ask me that question. And I pour a little bit of water on a tabletop, and I say, what does the profile of this little puddle of water look like? And they usually say, it's flat. And I said, yes, that's a very good answer. It's wrong, but it's mostly flat. It's flat in the middle, but out around the edges, where some forces they don't teach you about in high school, like surface tension and friction, it's round. It's not flat at all. It's deliciously curved and bent. And the analogy is that you need to go to the edge. That's where all the fun tension is. And so my advice to people entering this field is to dare, to dare to go to the edge, what is called in some places the chaotic interface, where chaos and order are fighting. And that's where the fun is. That's where we get to do some pretty creative stuff, and stuff that has never been done before, never thought of before. But we're so blessed to have such a strong statutory regime with such a great amount of discretion, that if you can conceive a business solution, the court will find a way to implement it. And that's just a marvelous zone of creativity that people need to dare to challenge.
On that note, I think, given what's going on, that creativity is going to be very much needed on, restructurings in the future, isn't it? I think we're going to see some really strange things. I think we're going to see legislation changing. I think we're going to see everyone stepping outside the box as we're moving forward in these times.
It's starting. The tidal wave is coming in, but what the end game of this is going to be is anybody's guess. But my prediction is there's going to be a lot more of it than anybody thinks.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that all of us in this world will be meeting in the chaotic region very soon. So on that note, Bob, thank you so much for joining us, and until next time.
All right, thanks, guys.